The phrase the New World Order doesn't end there. You can go beyond that, back all the way to 1873 with the founder of the Baha'i Faith talking about the necessity of a new world order. And that new world order would have a world judicial system. It would even have a world city, a world headquarters. It would truly be one world. This big idea, this dream, has pulsed and beat within the heart of American elites for at least a number of generations. It goes back a long ways.
Globalism is about, to most people, it's about instant communication worldwide. It's about open markets around the world, and open borders in many cases. But it's more nefarious than that. To me, it's about a religion of humanism, a religion that wants to reduce the Earth's population from the current 8 billion to 500 million, thanks to the likes of globalist Ted Turner. They believe that they're genetically predisposed to be the elite of the world and that they're going to run things. They trace themselves back to, of course, Friedrich Hegel, who is a 19th century German philosopher who believed in the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. And they believed in, over time, that man's going to become perfect eventually. And as a result, they're going to be in charge of this perfect world. And it's, of course, going to be a one world government run by them with far fewer of us than there are today. So the globalists are a pretty heinous group of people, and their ideology is typified by occultism, Luciferianism, and of course moral relativism. And so when I talk about the globalists, whoever they may be, the Kissingers, the David Rockefellers, the Hillarys, and so forth, I think psychopathic Luciferians, and that's their general ideology.
This is an idea that's been in circulation for a long time, and it goes into some pretty interesting areas. In 1951, the World Federalists met with Pope Pius XII, and in his speech to the World Federalists, talked to them in glowing terms that this was really a noble idea, that this was the direction that the world was going, that your program, gentlemen, is a necessary program. This is needed. The Pope's address in 1965 to the United Nations was also about the necessity of a world authority, and how what we really need is the world to come together through the United Nations to have a final world authority. The idea of a world authority is really intriguing. When I was at the United Nations Millennium Forum, one of the documents that was in circulation was Transformation of the World. It was put together by the head of the World Assembly of Turkic Peoples. He suggested a world king, a type of authority figure, somebody who could pull the nations together into one. We need some kind of world coordinator. Small doubt that the world does need a civilized coordinator in international relations and in settling global problems. More than that, this coordinator must be a stabilizing factor, actually, the last-ditch authority on the earth. He must win confidence of each man and each nation. People must be stark sure that this coordinator would solve any problem in a just and humane way, and one should be sure that in him he would find understanding and sympathy, that he would treat any nation as his own son, and that he is indeed the last resort. And the man should convince his terrestrial brothers therein by his practical deeds. ... Can the world community do without a coordinator? Definitely not.
This idea of uniting the world under one king, it's an ancient idea. The first to attempt this was Nimrod at Babel. They had a one-world religious system, government, language, and of course a king. This system was a foreshadowing of the coming Antichrist system and was even fueled by the entities of their esoteric religion. These are believed to be the very religious practices that comprise what we call today the Babylonian mystery schools, which are the religious beliefs and practices behind the various secret societies that drive the deep state. So it's really no surprise to see the same demonic entities that had fueled Nimrod's kingdom and motivated his actions alive and active today, fueling the deep state. The third level of the deep state is the unseen realm, or the spirit realm.
The third layer is what I call the unseen realm. This is the spiritual dimension. And of course, there are demonic players. There are spiritual activities that take place at the center of the universe, which I really believe happens to be in Washington, where the power is really focused. Where money and great power is exercised, inevitably there's going to be a spiritual war. Ephesians 6 being the example where powers and principalities are very much in play. And so the third layer, the unseen realm, is constantly influencing the second layer, the influencers, and the first layer, the political class and the bureaucracy.
In the deep state that I see right now, take one more step down. One more step down. In that next step down, you have the real operating deep state. There is no end to history without the supranatural side. There is no real alteration of the political world and a new world order and that kind of, there is no new world order unless it's supernaturally based. 2,600 years ago, God said that there's a fourth kingdom. That's the deepest deep state you can get to. God already gave insight to that system being built and coming. It's very defined in Revelation 13 also. It's political, it's military, it's economic, and very clearly it's technological. If we're that close, Revelation 13, the biblical Greek word is anabano, they will rise as if out of nowhere, the 10 kings. And so we've been given great insight to an agenda. It's like God ripped open Hell's Kitchen, saw the blueprints, and said, hey, here's some of the sequence of satanic evolution.
So it's the unseen realm where the real plots are devised. The spirit realm is a supernatural place that exists outside of our four dimensions. This is the place where entities live, devils and demons. We're dealing with principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places. This is the realm that the deep state conspirators are tapping into. Their ideology is steeped in occultism, and their power is attained through performing rituals. Rituals are the heart and soul of the cabals of the world. Rituals are the keys that open the doors to the spirit realm.
Magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will.
The role of ritual is essential because what ritual does is ritual connects the individual to the ancient concepts of continuity, that man, nature, and God are ultimately all one. Ritual is that experience, that mystical experience of continuity. You are stepping outside of time. You are stepping outside of a linear mindset. And you are now entering into an era of where everything is cyclical, everything is interdependent, everything is intertwined. And you are now acting in that spirit realm, that sense of continuity, where nature, God, and man are declared to be one. And you are enacting that. You are engaged in a type of spiritual theater, is a form of spiritual contract. And you are now a participant, a direct participant in that system and cycle of continuity, where all are connected to the all.
Where do the rituals come from? Just like we have biblical revelation, what God has done through all the Old Testament, New Testament, we have God initiating all of that. How to contact him, how to call on him, how to worship him. So in all real rituals, they're inspired by the other side. There is no ritual that just a human came up with. It's inspired by the spirits to give designation, to give it's like giving a phone number. This is how you call us. This circle, this language, these symbols, this sigil, this is what you do to summon us. And if you do what we do, and we give you the keys or the phone number to our side, if you do everything correct, and if you do everything right, we'll show up. So it begins with them. There's no ritual in any book that I've ever seen or read that wasn't inspired from the other side first. They are giving their contact number. And when that occurs and somebody gets that and they begin to do that, obviously, even a Ouija board is a spirit-given way of contact, a doorway. Biblical Greek, it's a topos, a doorway that gives a legal right. They will come through. They want that door.
The most powerful ancient rituals have been passed down and immaculately kept by the heads of secret orders from the ancient world. It is by these rituals that the gods of old are summoned and cross over, empowering their henchmen to carry out their plans on the world's playing field. The high-level Freemasons, in particular, have been involved in some of the most maniacal religious rites, gripping the very core of Washington, D.C., as they conjure the spirit of the final age. The House of the Temple, also known as the Herodome in Washington, D.C., is the holy of holies of the Masonic craft, and is also considered somewhat of a Masonic mecca to the Scottish Rite Masons around the world.
At the Herodome across town, when they are conducting the raising of Osiris ceremony, in the middle of that chapel room is an altar, and on that altar are all of the holy books of the great religions of the world. But above that is a binding utility. It's one of the most famous in all of antiquity. It's called the Magic Square of Apollo, or it's called the Magic 666 Square, because the panels in the stylized sunlight above the altar are exactly the same layout as a magic square, so it's a stylized Magic 666 Square. In antiquity, that was used to raise the spirit of Apollo from the underworld, which is central, of course, to the magic based on the great obelisk behind me, the dome behind me, and the Freemasonic and Rosicrucian ideas of the return of Apollo Osiris at the end of time to lead the New World Order. Now, to effectualize that, at the Herodome, they conduct a raising of Osiris ceremony where the Bibles and the other books are bound beneath the Magic 666 Square. This square was famous in antiquity because when adding the numbers in any direct line, horizontally, vertically, the numbers always equaled 111. But when you added all of the numbers that are in the Magic 666 Square, they equaled 666. So interestingly, when the Freemasons built this giant obelisk to George Washington, they maintained those influential numbers in that the obelisk is 666 inches long along each of the lines at the base, but it is 555 feet high. And if you think of that as a magic square, the number 111 remains and extends down beneath the surface of the earth to reach the totality of the number 666. So all of the numbers important to a magic Apollonian square used for raising the spirit of Apollo are incorporated into the design of the Washington Monument. Now, what most Americans also don't know is right over here, beneath the ground, is a miniature obelisk made to look just like this one, except it's only 12 feet tall, 12 being the number of the perfect government that will be incorporated when the Novus Ordo Seclorum prophecy comes to its fruition and the man of sin becomes Apollo in flesh.
One of the reoccurring elements of occult rituals, both ancient and modern, is numerology. The basic principles hold that numbers have a great deal of magical and spiritual magnitude. Some numbers are more potent and carry more power than others, and strategic combinations of certain numbers can render specific magical effects. Additionally, numbers also tie into planetary significance within rituals.
In the magical Hebrew Kabbalah, each planet is associated with a number, intelligence, or spirit. The intelligence of the sun is Nakel, which equals 111, while the spirit of the sun is Soroth and equals 666. It makes sense, therefore, that Freemasons built the Washington Monument obelisk to form a magic square at its base, the exact values of the binding square of the sun god Apollo Osiris installed in the ceiling above where the Osiris ceremony is conducted, in the house of the temple. 111 is also the number of the Trinity, both dark and light. Now, when you compare the raising ceremony that's held at the Herodome beneath a magic 666 square to the Washington obelisk, there's some interesting facts. In fact, the same Bible that Dan Brown called the lost symbol is a Bible that was placed in a magic binding square inside the testes of the Washington obelisk of Osiris, the Washington monument, the purpose of which is to restrain the Bible's influence, just as it is in the Herodome, while allowing the seed of Osiris to materialize.
In order for the powerful deceivers to bring about their demonic will through magic, they attempt to attack their eternal enemy, the God of the Bible. Not only are these men seeking to raise the spirit of Osiris and bring about the kingdom of the Antichrist, but they feel the need to bind the power of the living God in order to level the playing field of the last days. But unfortunately for them, there is no binding the word of God or even remotely constraining the power of the Most High. This is a great example of them trying to manifest their will into reality via ancient magic rituals of numerology. One 20th century specimen who enacted similar rituals, dedicating his every breath to magic and numerology, is none other than Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley is a Luciferian Moses, if you will, with a law of the darkest ancient magic and a proven occult track record of success. Aleister Crowley's magic and influence has been seen distinctly throughout secret societies and in the lives of celebrities, politicians, and presidents, as well as spawning various cultural movements. His themes and writings have been vastly present in popular music, television shows, and films. It's practically impossible to separate the Crowleyan ties from the spiritual shifts that we've seen in the course of the 20th and 21st centuries. His dark shadow continues to lurk over humanity as the occult prophecies persist through the end of this age.
Aleister Crowley was born in England in 1875. He was born as the only son of a very wealthy brewing family. He went to the finest prep schools and was able to enter King's College, Cambridge, where he studied at one of the most auspicious universities in the UK. While he was there at that university, he became interested in three things: poetry, mountaineering, and the occult, and studied everything he could. And he heard about an invisible college, something that the Rosicrucians used for their secret society, and he wanted to investigate and find out what this invisible college was. And it led him to join the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a post-Masonic secret society. That means that it was beyond Masonry. So people who entered into it had already gone through all of the grades of Masonry. And he absorbed all the information from the Golden Dawn and went on to start his own religion called Thelema, which he based upon the receipt of the Book of the Law in Egypt in 1904, where he said he received this information from a being called Aiwass. During his life, Crowley wrote about the variety of different spirits that he contacted. Aiwass was one of them. Another one he termed the magician or the wizard. He also did the Alamantra working in New York in 1918, where he came in contact with a being that he drew that looks very similar to what is known today as the Gray Alien. Crowley thought of himself not just as an occult scholar, but really as a prophet. And he talked to himself as the prophet of the new aeon, this cosmological age that would change current understandings of the world. So he called himself this prophet of the new aeon, and he was the head. He became the head of the German secret society, the Ordo Templi Orientis, in 1925. But why I think Crowley is really referenced as one of the most important figures in modern history is that he left a vast repository of writings. You could distill all of his teachings into one simple 11-word, 11-syllable axiom, which is, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And that was really his intent. He really wanted to bring on this new age of Horus, which he called the birth of the child, a birth of a new value system, a non-Christian value system. And if you look back on the 20th century history, you can see that that has been in effect upon human civilization.
Crowley, obviously, in his adamant rejection of Christ, it reminds me a little bit of, like Judas, if your heart is walled up against God and walled against, you become very open for the other side, because that's what the other side is all about. Opposition, Satan, the fallen cherub, is in opposition to God. So when there's a heart that's bent that way, and that heart is angry and so forth, you already got doors being open. And then when they pursue, demonic presence, dark side presence will only guide people to pursue darker measures so that broader doors can be opened. They do love to possess people, but maybe more than that, they like to use people. 1 Timothy 4:1, where people become vessels, conduits, and the demons then can use them to write those doctrines of demons. Then that influence, look at Crowley's writings. His writings influence far more millions than when he was alive. So he has charged writings, rituals in those writings, the Alma working, and the crossing over of the entity Lamb. This is huge. We're talking about major rituals, and it couldn't have been done without blood. Even his own son died in one of those rituals. They're predatory. They're observers. They're watching. They're looking. And they're always going to come masqueraded. They have the power. The biblical Greek word is meta schizmazotai. It's that verse we read where Satan's able to masquerade as an angel of light. We read the verse quick, but it's real. They have the power, the supra-human power, to alter their presentation without changing their nature. And it's all done and designed for the sake of deception. So in his case, this high-level entity, engages him. And that's part of the initiation for him, from their side initiating him. Of course, he's acquiring presence, power, gaining what he would consider as knowledge from that side. And of course, then he's inspired to write. And from there, he pursued deeper and darker. Sex rituals and sex magic was big on the agenda, as is all the darkest of stuff. And then human and blood sacrifice is involved in it also. Now, some say in the Amalantra working, when Lamb came through, this entity that looks like a big head with two big eyes, it obviously looks like the Greys that eventually came out, later on in the 40s here in the United States, where that presence began to come out and be shown. Step back from that, and the Amalantra working, the people that were at the ritual acknowledged that they know they could feel and even see something come through the porthole that Crowley in the ritual was creating. They were doing a ritual that opened a doorway, but it was so big that they could see and then feel this entity come through. They always present, whether in ufology, rituals, spirit guides, ascended masters, great white brotherhood, that side's always morphing their presentation so that it's acceptable, excitable to the individuals. No different than Genesis 3. When the fallen cherub came there, he was like the shining one. He not only amazed with what he was speaking, but his presence would have been something to amaze Eve.
Two of the well-known 20th century figures that were heavily influenced by the magic of Aleister Crowley were L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons. L. Ron Hubbard was a famous fiction writer, and of course the founder of the popular cult known as the Church of Scientology, while Jack Parsons was arguably one of the most legendary rocket scientists of all time. Both men were highly involved in Crowleyan sex magic rituals.
Both Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were disciples of Aleister Crowley, and they practiced his teaching called Thelema as a philosophy that is defined by the maxim, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." It comes from Crowley's Book of the Law, which can be connected to the spirit cooking ceremonies of the Podesta brothers and Abramovich from the WikiLeaks scandal. But these are entities that are channeled by an incorporeal demon intelligence named Awas. Thelema is a narcissistic ideology that undergirds several esoteric magic societies like the AA and the Ordo Templo Orientis that fundamentally oppose God's moral law. So Satan targets sexuality because procreation is the human capability that comes closest to the divine. And as a result, it's not surprising that sexual perversion and sex magic are essential components of occult rituals. Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard's Babylon working entailed all sorts of aberrant sexual activity. Now, In Ptolemaic literature, Babylon has three conceptual aspects. Number one is the gateway to the city of the pyramids. Number two is the Scarlet Woman. And number three, the Great Mother. She serves as a portal for sorcerers.
One of the paramount rituals conducted in the 20th century was by two individuals, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. It became known as the Babylon Working.
Babylon working, it was a conjuring of what they thought was called the Whore of Babylon, referred to in Revelation. So they thought the entity was real. Jack Parsons, rocket scientist, performed more than once the Babylon working, which was to bring a demonic high-level power presence into the actual sexual act so that the spirit could be then placed inside the physical side. And at the moment of conception, their view was that spiritual presence would augment. So the moment of conception, there's like a explosion. All of a sudden, the human spirit is there, and that's when life begins. Well, they want to inject that presence, conjure that presence. The goal was to bring about a hybrid being.
The idea of conjuring the Whore of Babylon in this ritual was quite fitting to have taken place in America. The occult world has long desired to revive the spirit of Babylon. The resurrection of the ancient one-world system once failed, but esoterically believed to prevail at the end of this age. These occult prophecies built the framework and ideals for America to become the world's superpower and philosophic empire, the very land foreseen as the final Babylon, and revered as such, not only in the world of mysticism, but also prophetically laid out in the Bible. So on the very land of the revived Babylon, they performed the Babylon working ritual, and the conjuring began.
The Babylon working sex magic rituals that was carried out by L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, the founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, happened through the mid-40s into 1946, and the whole purpose of it was to give birth to a magical being, a moon child, described in Crowley's works. And so they used the powerful energy of ninth-degree sex magic, rites that were intended to open a doorway through which the goddess Babylon herself, the archetype divine feminine, might be born, might come into the earth, might appear in human form. Now, Jack Parsons believed that he and L. Ron Hubbard actually accomplished this task of bringing the Whore of Babylon into materialization through a series of rituals that culminated in 1946. Jack Parsons' own biography actually preserves a celebratory statement in which he says that she was embodied in the womb of a female child. And in a fragment from his writings, Parson, who says he's exhausted but also exultant, he declares the work a success and believed that Babylon, in the manner of a dark, immaculate conception, was due to be born to a woman somewhere on earth within 9 months' time. He actually wrote, "Babylon is incarnate upon the earth today, awaiting the proper hour for her manifestation." Now, if one could believe these writings, you would expect that a female child was to be born around 1947, and indeed such an influential feminist was delivered that year, who could offer the most promise for identifying the fruit of Parsons' infamous ritual, and that would be none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton. Intriguingly, Parsons later referred again to the Babylon Scarlet Woman, and this time by a particular name, in his Book of the Antichrist on October 31, 1948, a full 69 years ago, when the female child would have been around 1 year of age. Parsons wrote that the spirit of Babylon came to him, but this time identifying itself as Hilarion, who, he said, would grow on to become an international public figure, dedicating to bringing the work of the Antichrist to fruition. Why is that important? Because the etymology of Hilarion is the arcane Hillary. Now, you have to ask yourself, how many internationally influential feminists were born in 1947 who are named Hillary and that have the potential to become the leader or vice president or influence the election of the president of the United States, the most powerful nation on earth that was dedicated from its inception to the enthronement of Osiris Apollo, who the Bible itself recognizes as Antichrist, and also asked how possible it would be that an entity calling itself Hillary made clear to Jack Parsons 69 years ago that it was dedicated to helping the rise of the man of sin.
According to Bill Clinton in a number of books, Hillary Clinton has been involved with Wicca, gone to so-called Wicca meetings or quote churches in Los Angeles, and she would decorate the White House Christmas tree, according to Gary Aldridge, with occultic-like figurines. That's rather bizarre, I would think. She was involved in communicating with the dead, much like Eleanor Roosevelt did.
All these questions came to my mind recently when reading the WikiLeaks email revelations and remembering how Hillary had hinted that alien disclosure would come if she was elected president, and how the people around her, Abramovich, the Podestas, others close to Hillary, affiliates of hers, were manifest believers in the same UFOs and what they call contiguous aliens, the same that Parsons and Hubbard saw through the Church of Scientology, and so on, that's actually based on an alien called Xenu, as well as being practitioners of the same Crowley occultism that Parsons and Hubbard were devotees of. When you consider all this, it seems to be immediately beyond probability of coincidence that in the days leading up to the last presidential election, these modern Telemas actually believed that Hillary is, or that she could be, the incarnation of the archetype divine feminine, the whore of Babylon, the Hilarion that is set to take the throne of the most powerful nation on earth to assist the Antichrist in his bid to rule the entire world.
This constant theme of the whore of Babylon, or the worship of the Babylonian goddess, saturates the American system, from the steeples of government buildings and cathedrals all the way to the Statue of Liberty off the coast of New York. It has always been a mainstay of the American system. Whether we're dealing with Lady Liberty, Athena, Isis, or even Gaia, we are constantly being inundated with this ancient occult theme of goddess worship across our land. But how would the cabal strategically embed this idea of goddess worship into the culture of the everyday American citizen? How could they condition a society into following after such a perversion on a massive scale?
America's introduction to accepting a pagan worldview in a serious way began April 22nd, 1970. It happened in high schools, it happened in colleges, thousands of high schools and colleges. April 22nd, 1970 was America's first National Environmental Teach-In, America's first Earth Day. When America's first Earth Day was introduced, the National Teach-In, Friends of the Earth put together a handbook called the Environmental Handbook. Really simple. And in the Environmental Handbook, the very first set of essays and articles introduces the reader to a Smokey the Bear Sutra, where Smokey the Bear comes to America's youth as a mystical being coming to crush the butts of the capitalists, to crush out the cigarette butts. Of course, that's the imagery of Smokey the Bear. Crush out the butts of those who see exceptionalism, that see differences, that see uniqueness, that see separation. Now, it doesn't quite say exactly that, but that's what you can read between the lines. Later on in the Environmental Handbook, Lynn White Jr. has an essay. It's a very famous essay. In fact, this essay really set the tone for the environmental movement. The essay demonstrated that Christianity is to blame. The world's ecological crisis rests on Christian shoulders. And until we move away from a Christian worldview, until we move away from a Christian ethos, we will continue to have a worsening ecologic crisis. What's interesting is Lynn White Jr. said what we need is a new religion. We need a new way of looking at the world through a different lens. no longer Christianity, but some other religious construct. Towards the back end of the Environmental Handbook, you have a list of acceptable religions, acceptable religious practices. Buddhism, shamanism, earth-friendly religions. Christianity, right up. No longer necessary. Christianity is the problem. The solution is opening ourselves up to new forms of spirituality, an earth-friendly, earth-centric, earth-loyalty-based spirituality. And that flavoring of the very first Earth Day comes through all the way to now. America was introduced to Gaia, to the Mother Earth, to the ancient idea that the Earth is alive as a spiritual entity on April the 22nd, 1970. When we consider Gaia and Gaia worship, the idea of a great mother, we can go all the way back through ancient times and see elements of her scattered throughout different cultures. Ishtar, Isis, Diana, Athena. What's interesting is the great mother, the great goddess, Gaia, to use that language, because it becomes almost an umbrella mother that absorbs all into her, because it's all built around continuity and oneness.
It's even more damning to consider that the city chosen as the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., literally stands for the District of Columbia. The nation's capital was named for the New World's goddess of liberty and was from her 1776 infancy a reincarnated Isis, containing all the necessary attributes of the ancient infernal goddess. Her worship and reverence has spread far beyond pagans and covens and cabals, reaching into public schools, universities, and mainstream beliefs. Out of this occult District of Columbia, the spirit of the goddess seethes continuously.
As we consider the various elements of occult rites, we can't overlook the power of blood. One of the highest forms of magic involves the sacrificing of human life, the spilling of blood. Blood sacrifice has been held to the highest regard for thousands of years, and it is believed to quickly engage the other side.
We interface with this body through the blood. The life is in the blood. So we're connected. We're not just up in the pineal gland. Our whole human spirit is housed and we're plugged in through the blood. There's physics to this. So when you have a blood sacrifice and chemicals are being released in that blood sacrifice, everything's heightened. That's why they want to raise the energies. They want pain and fear and terror. They want all of us to be raised because it helps broaden the door so the spirit can come in and interface, grab into the end of rituals when the issue of death comes. And that's how they're designed. When death eventually comes, then that gives the complete